Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2, joining me today is...
A Steve for fun.
A Steve for fun. When he's not feeling in a fun mood, he becomes someone else.
It's true. It's true, I become something else.
Yep. So anyway, we're here today because the internet is driving me crazy, Steve. So we're going to review Wish, I think it is still technically the latest in the Disney animated line. There might have been something else that's come out, but I
think it's the newest one.
Yeah, it came out late last year, and it's the big film that was meant to celebrate the studio of Disney turning 100 years old, which is somewhat dystopian. But it's just, I don't know, it's an interesting little mile marker to think that we're over a century of Disney entertainment in. And it performed horribly at the box office. It was a, unabashed failure for them. Critically, it was absolutely panned by a majority of people. And just even hardcore Disney fans really did not like this movie. And I've just kind of seen somehow, I don't know, I don't understand the YouTube and Twitter algorithms and stuff, but I've just seen all this online vitriol for this movie where people just post clips of it and then start talking about, this doesn't make any sense, this is stupid. And so before all of that news fully reached me, when I just heard the beginnings of the stirrings from people not liking the trailer, I went and took Leah to this movie in theaters. And I came out of the theater, I'm like, that was actually really good. That was the best Disney villain we've gotten in over a decade. And then Leah liked it, and we picked it up at the library at one point, and then it came on Disney Plus, and she's watched it a couple more times. And I've had visceral emotional reactions to this film, coupled with very complicated feelings and thoughts about it, because I think it's legitimately probably the best Disney film in almost a decade, if it wasn't for Moana fucking carrying.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
Yeah. So it's just, I don't know, it's an interesting fucking thing, and I wanted to have a discussion about it because the internet's driving me crazy with, I don't understand the hatred for this movie. A couple, criticisms I get. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it's, a perfect film, but, now this is actually really fucking good, so I wanted to talk about it. What do you think, Steve?
So I put it in a camp of movie, on the same tier as something like The Strangers, which I just rewatched recently, where I have no interest in ever watching this movie again, but I really do want to write about it and talk about it because it's really interesting to talk about.
Okay, that's cool. I'm glad.
It's because I think on an idea level, this movie is really interesting. On a thematic level, it's really interesting. On an execution level, I don't think it's very good, but it's interesting. My big thing about this movie that I thought was fascinating was it was just a movie about how Disney's evil. Is what you and I talked about. Like, oh shit, the bad guys just fucking Walt Disney.
I know.
When did this happen?
I know.
it's a really cool idea. I think the trouble is just like the way the story is executed, and the way the musicals and stuff are integrated are just not very good.
Okay,
And I
see, I
think
would
it kind
disagree
of
with that, but that's interesting.
I think part of the problem is like it's making this interesting statement about how you can turn over all of your ideas and emotions to a patronizing monarch and in turn become stagnant and dull and lifeless, until someone realizes that you don't actually have to give up your creativity to this monolithic thing that really has no power over you. And it does that in a way that I think is extremely generic. My big point of comparison for this movie is like I think it's just like 20 years later updated version of Shrek, but I think Shrek is equally a movie that's kind of lampooning specifically Disney in a lot of ways, but I think Shrek ultimately was a bit more interesting because I think the problem with this movie is Disney is no longer the top dog leading animation company in the world. I think they've kind of bottomed out over the last 20 years, where Disney and Pixar movies, Pixar especially now, which I feel like has kind of fallen off its horse, are just kind of like obligatory things that come out every now and then. And I think Disney's desire to make live action lesser remakes has really hurt their marketability for their original animated movies. Whether or not they're good is a separate question. But I think Disney as an animation studio has like really fallen behind as far as doing interesting animated features in like a post Spider-Verse kind of world, or even like a post Lego movie kind of world. And I think this movie is a kind of a testament to that, because it's a movie that's criticizing those aspects of Disney by also perpetuating those aspects of Disney. So I think it's kind of, I think it's an interesting movie to talk about. I don't think it's very good, but I do think it's interesting.
See, I don't know. I actually quite enjoyed it. I think it is actually a pretty good movie. Again, it's not immune from criticism. One thing, like, when I was preparing for picking this, I mentioned to you, I'm like, you wouldn't like this thing because it makes a lot of references that kind of go too far and end up taking you out of the story, and that gets a little annoying from time to time. I've kind of like come to the point where I've come around on some of them, and I'm starting to like notice even subtler ones that I didn't notice the first couple times. So I'm kind of like actually enjoying those aspects a little bit more, because initially they came off as like really ham-fisted and like too in your face, and then I'm like, oh no, those are just the bad ones. There's like so many more though. Song-wise, I actually really disagree with you. Again, in particular, based on where Disney has been the last like 10 years or so. So like, this goes a little bit past 10 years, but Frozen is, you know, Disney's fucking cash cow of animation, right? And the thing that like got me, and it took me a long time to realize this, we were driving with Leah one day and she wanted to listen to Frozen music, so we were listening to all the songs, and then the last song in Frozen is Fixer Upper, where the trolls sing about how Anna and Kristoff should be getting together. And that's like almost a good 20 to 30 minutes before the end of the movie. So like your musical film doesn't actually have a like big final musical number. It's just kind of like a like random insert musical number is the big final one by accident, because it's just not a very well thought out or structured film. Whereas this one, your climax of the film is a big musical number with like the whole cast. You've got this through line connecting it back to, it's a reprise of Asha's like, you know, Princess Looking at the Water song, and it also connects very hard to the You're a Star song when you get the explanation for why it is that we wish on stars, which is again the most like fundamentally Disney thing. It's the fucking company's like theme song. So I don't know, I thought that was just a really cool way to, like musically at least, tie the whole movie together. A couple of the other songs, I'm not like super in love with them. The Revolution one is kind of growing on me just a little bit, but it's still not the best thing ever. And I'm not in love with "This Is the Thanks I Get," the villain song, but I am in love with the fact that the villain fucking gets a goddamn song and isn't a fucking afterthought in the movie. So I'll kind of take it. And then like I might have just listed off all the songs, or I might be forgetting one, and that kind of speaks to the strength of the other ones if I am forgetting one. But musically, I thought they were very good.
Can I
Narratively,
just hop on that?
oh sure. If we want to still talk
Yeah.
about music,
Yeah. I the thing about the music for me in this movie is I'm a big fan of musicals. I wasn't always, but like over the last few years, I've come to like really, really love a lot of musicals.
hmm
So I've been watching a ton of them over the last couple of years, like everything from Swing Time and Yankee Doodle Dandy all the way up to like La La Land, which I really like. La La Land. I don't understand why everyone hates that movie. I think it's a good movie. But besides the point, I think the problem with the music in this movie is that every single song, whether or not they are individually good songs, every single song is an anthem. Every single song is a big sort of operatic title character or lead character singing the song, asserting who they are in a positive way song. Even if it's the villain, even if it's the villain just like asserting who he is, every song is just an anthem. There's no like highs and lows in the music. Even like the sad princess song, where that you mentioned before, that song is really just kind of her asserting like, you know what, everyone else is wrong, I am right, I'm going to continue doing this thing. Every song is just kind of like too it's too poppy, it's too trying to convey like the most positive iteration of this emotion as possible, and there's never a chance for you to get like a song that's like specifically sad or specifically comedic or anything like that. Everything is just an anthem. um this Is the Thanks I Get is maybe the one I like the most, only because I feel like it's the one that's most different. And then at the big sort of finale song is cool in the moment, because you're right, it does kind of structurally build up to that point, which is honestly doing a lot compared to other Disney animated movies where they don't even end up doing that. But I think the problem at the end of the day is just like there's no diversity of emotion in the songs. They're all just kind of the same style bop radio hit, I'm going to tell you who I am song.
Okay. I can see that. I don't really see it as a problem. I can see the idea of the anthem thing. I don't really necessarily see that as a problem. Because it just they mainly just work for me. You might be right about they're not conveying a huge array of emotions, but I don't know. It just kind of hit me in a good place. Like I said, I got like pretty emotionally invested the second time I think watching through this, and like that ending song where she's literally being tortured, and it's like it's the villain has won kind of moment, and it's not through incompetence, it's not by accident, and it's very just fundamentally emotionally satisfying ending that she's able to find strength through the other people because we are stars. I just thought that was such a absolutely beautiful moment, and like it keeps building, and everyone like starts joining in with the way the songs builds up, and then it all comes to that crescendo where like she gets to re-participate in the song. She gets to come in and finish it off, and then you get like that great emotional climax. And I'll just be 100% like that actually made me fucking tear up. Like I'm actually getting a little something just sitting here thinking about and talking about it. I was just so absolutely blown away by how great a moment that all comes to, and it's kind of what made me like look at the way people are talking about this movie and just shitting on it constantly, and I'm like, there's something wrong with you guys. So since you're like you think it's an interesting movie to talk about, but you don't think it's a very particularly good movie, but I like sent you the fucking clip of people reacting to her and Magnifico's argument about what he's doing with people's wishes.
Yeah, that was trippy because
Right? Okay.
who the fuck are these people?
That's
What do
my
they
thing.
think this is about?
That's my thing. Like, so it's interesting to hear you talk about this movie and you think it's like not good for like, you know, either structural or just like craft reasons, I guess you might say.
Sure, yeah.
And then to see the like vast majority of reaction being like, no, you should just give up the most important part of yourself for safety and security. I'm like,
You know,
what?
that scene in context is really interesting because one of the things I don't love about the movie either is I feel like what's his face? Malefico?
Magnifico.
Uh, Magnifico. I think Magnifico goes like 0 to 100 way too quick for my taste. But that scene in it is really interesting because you basically know from the jump this dude is bad after you get there. Because when she asks him to grant her grandfather's wish, he looks at it and he says something really interesting, which is that the grandfather's wish is too vague, that he wants to inspire the next generation. But like, what does that mean? And like for a second, for like a split second, you're like, oh, that's actually interesting. Like, what does it mean to be the curator of wishes and determine which ones you can and can't grant based on how specific they are? Like, are we playing like on Genie from a Magic Lamp rules of like whatever you say will be taken literally? Maybe you do have to be careful about it. And then he immediately just turns and becomes this weird sort of IP totalitarian who wants to control all of the wishes. And so when the people in the comments were talking about like how he makes a good argument, they're full of shit. Because no, he's straight up the bad guy. He's just Disney incarnate as a character. But it gave me a little bit of false hope when he made that statement about the wish being vague, because that's an idea that the movie never really plays with, is people have these wishes, but how many of them are fully formed? How much of them could you really do something with? I did really like the touch at the very, very end after they defeat Magnifico, and that one girl is like, I want to fly, and this other person wants to invent flight, so he pairs them up together. And like it creates this nice little utopian image of like, okay, people's wishes can kind of coexist and they can work on them together, and that's cute and wholesome. But that specific thing about like what Magnifico was getting at, or what his argument is outside of just being Disney IP overlord, it's not subtle. So I don't know how people miss it, but I wish it was better developed.
I mean, fair enough. It's just like blows me away that like people, of all the Disney movies that people have decided to shit on, it like I'm torn because I'm actually kind of happy that it's this movie that people decided to hate, because it just continues to prove my point of the quality of the film never matters. It's just about the hype behind it. And also, it is kind of funny, just, you know, in a fuck you kind of way to Disney, that their big 100-year celebration film is just a fucking flop. I
do love that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of glad about that. I'm not gonna lie, but it's just on the like maybe I didn't get the memo, Steve. Maybe everyone just agreed that like for the meme we were gonna pretend this movie sucks.
Well, it's funny because like I remember Disney making a big deal about their 100-year anniversary, and like so many of their movies got re-released in theaters as like a 100th anniversary screening, and it all kind of culminated in Wish coming out. And then I remember no one talking about Wish.
Yeah, and everything that you heard was just, Wish is so bad, and I'm like, but it's not, though. At least not for the reasons that people are saying it's bad.
Not for the reason people are saying. Yeah, I think the clip you sent me, the things people are complaining about seem kind of ludicrous. I don't think it's a good movie, but I do think it's a lot more interesting than people are giving it credit for.
Yeah. The other thing I've seen is like people like trying to dissect the lyrics and talk about how they don't make sense in certain songs, and I'm like,
oh, that's
I
dumb.
mean, you know, if you're gonna do that, you're gonna have a fun time going through literally any pop song ever made. What the fuck is Rock the Cashba? But anyway, even outside of that,
what? I don't know what that means.
yeah, even outside of that, like the like moments of lyrics that I've seen people point out as like these don't make sense, and I'm like, no, but it does though. like what's the one from Asha's song is, and I'll throw caution to every warning sign. And someone's like, see, that means that you would be cautious when you see a warning sign. I'm like, you don't throw caution though. That's you're careful with caution. You don't throw it. Like, I just don't understand, man. So it's been an interesting one, and like I said, man, I'm not gonna say this movie is immune from criticism. The moment you talked about at the end, where it's like, you want to fly, he wants to build a flying machine, and it's like it's literally just Peter Pan, and I'm like, that's a little much. Like that one felt a little on the nose.
The Neverland one is also kind of rough.
Yeah, how about Neverland? Yeah, you want a nanny to take care of your awful children? Popping this one, and I'm like,
Yeah, that was cringe.
Yeah, but you know what's cool though? At the same time, when he's like in his little fucking evil lair, there's just the apple from Snow White on his fucking desk, and I'm kind of all about that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, like when Asha is in the woods being like the distraction so the not seven dwarves can free the wishes, she's dressed like the fairy godmother from Cinderella. And I'm like, see, I like that though. That's cool. And when she's like escaping, she hits the wagon she's in and it grows legs and climbs just like the one in Sleeping Beauty. And I'm like, they're just little things like that are fucking cool as shit to throw into a 100-year anniversary movie to me. Like, just little quick subtle references, and I don't think I would get as many of them as I do if I have not spent the last 4 fucking years watching every goddamn Disney movie because I have a 4-year-old daughter. But that's what it is. So it's like, I don't know, just as an adult, it certain ones added an extra dimension. It was just when they got like too plain that I thought it got annoying. That being said, some of them that are like more obvious, I thought actually worked pretty well, like her friends, the Not Seven Dwarves, because it was an interesting way to take those personality character types, which, you know, personality in fucking Snow White, it's his name's Sleepy, he's sleepy. It's just, it's like the trait that character had, and like update them and make them a more well-rounded character and just have them be like her fucking crew. I thought that they actually ended up working pretty well and were kind of fun. I don't know. I liked a lot about this movie, but again, it's far from perfect, but I'm just absolutely blown away by the number of people that straight up hate it.
The one big positive I'll give it is I feel like Magnifico is a more interesting villain than a lot of Disney bad guys have been in years. Because you and I have always talked about like the problem with Frozen is the bad guy, or how the movie's not structured around that at all.
He's
a lot
completely
of Disney
an
movies,
afterthought. It
exactly.
drives me fucking crazy.
A lot of Disney villains, like after the '90s, are just kind of toothless. Also, like you're never gonna get the priest dude from Notre Dame who sings a song about being horny anymore. You know, that's never gonna happen anymore. But the closest it seems like we've come is Magnifico, who gets to have a big supervillain song, is kind of clearly deranged by the end and is a little bit scarier than I would expect him to be. And I think Chris Pine does a really good job. He has a really good singing voice too.
Yeah, no, I really like Magnifico. That was the thing, like, the main takeaway I had the very first time I watched it. I'm like, finally, some good fucking food with a goddamn Disney villain. Because, like, the closest to him we've gotten in years was fucking Tangled, all the way back in, like, what is that, 2010, 2011? With Mother Gothel. And she still isn't, like, really all that. Like, Dr. Falsier in Princess and the Frog is okay. At least he gets a song. But he's just, like, not as interesting, and he doesn't have much screen time, much, like, presence. And then, don't even fucking want to talk about Frozen. Moana doesn't really have a villain. It's just kind of like a quest. There's just all these examples.
Encanto doesn't really have a villain.
Yeah, no, and it's fucking... that movie.
I like that movie, actually.
I like things about it, but as someone who like dealt with an abusive, bullying sibling growing up, the idea of, oh yeah, we solved all our problems in one song just kind of fucking bothers me. um,
That's fair. That's fair. I will say I was thinking a lot about Encanto when I was watching this because that's the last Disney movie I'd seen. I haven't seen Strange World. I haven't seen Raya and the Last Dragon or Frozen 2 or any of that stuff. But I was thinking a lot about Encanto, and I do like Encanto more than I like this movie, in part because I think it's just a bit more emotionally nuanced than this one is, and I think the songs have a little bit more variety. I think the Bruno song in that movie is more iconic than anything in this movie.
mhm.
But it is an interesting point of comparison, though, because I feel like you're kind of getting the two poles of Disney with those movies. One is something that's like extremely sugary sweet with the happiest ending you could possibly have, regardless of how dark the subject matter warrants. And then the other is a movie that's more sort of like classically tailor-made fairy tale with all the usual characters and all the usual bad guys. And I think they both kind of excel and fail for similar reasons, which is just Disney doesn't branch out at all anymore. It doesn't matter like what topic they decide to make a movie on. They just seem to like refuse to branch out.
No, I would tend to agree with you. And it's funny because this is such a failure, they're like becoming even more conservative with what they're willing to make now. Which is why like Moana 2 was going to be the pilot for a television series, but now it's just becoming its own film for release, I think, next year. Which, you know, from a business standpoint, I can't necessarily argue with them on that, but just creatively, this is such a fucking interesting movie because Disney has become this cultural force that is like making a deal with the devil, where it's one of the most prestigious companies to work for, especially if you are talking about animation in the States. It has so many resources that they give to the people that work with and create for them. And it sounds like, for a lot of people, it's like a dream come true to work for Disney. And then you get in there and there's just so many restrictions, so many rules, so many like very fundamentally toxic and horrifying things about Disney. And this movie is just a like tribute to that and a exploration of that weird contradictory feeling of it's the happiest place on earth, but also it's got like this dark side to it. We talk about like Magnifico just kind of turns on a dime and he goes like super evil way too quick, but at the same time it's like you watch the way that he starts handling things, particularly when he goes to like the dark magic, and the first thing that fucking came to mind for me was the way that fucking Disney dealt with the fact that Anastasia was coming out in theaters, and it was like, you know, their formula for an animated film but made by a different studio, so they just did everything they possibly could to sabotage the movie upon release. And it's like, whoa! Jesus, guys!
Tarantino has talked about like how Disney has sabotaged screenings of his movies just to kind of get theater venues and stuff. Like how he had a contract to release a movie in a specific theater, but Disney was doing like a big anniversary thing that year, and Disney basically like strong-armed the theater and say like, look, if you want to show the Tarantino movie and honor your contract, you can, but then you'll never get another Disney movie again. So they're like they just had to eat the loss on Tarantino and do what Disney wanted to do at that point. Like, this is like some fucking mafia shit, though.
Right, though? So it's like this weird conflict of emotions because it's like such a happy, you know, image that the company has, but just like deep down they do some of the dirtiest, most underhanded shit to stay on top. You know, lately it's been buying up every fucking IP possible so that it's like become impossible for them to ever actually take a hit. Like, Disney, this movie maybe even included, Disney has not produced like a great film in at least 4 or 5 years, and yet they've suffered nothing from it.
Well, it depends, right? It depends on whether you mean animation has
No,
not
no, no,
produced
not just Disney animation.
or do you
Talking
mean anything
Disney,
Disney owns?
MCU, Star Wars.
No, that's not true though, because they own 20th Century Fox.
Oh, that's true. See, like
They own
it's
20th
so
Century
fucked up.
Fox. Like the problem, and this is the other thing I wanted to get to about the wishes is Magnifico hoarding all the wishes and hiding them and essentially making the population who wished for them forget. Reminds me way less of Disney animation and more about what they're doing with 20th Century Fox, where they bought up that entire company. They threw majority of Fox's library into the Disney vault, never to be released again. And all of the Fox stuff that you can find available to stream is kind of sequestered off into one small section of Hulu. And the movies that do end up getting wide theatrical releases from 20th Century Fox get extremely limited runs, no marketing whatsoever, or in the case of some movies like Prey, they just get dumped onto streaming and never get the chance to see the light of day. I don't think Prey even has a physical release, even though it came out like 2 or 3 years ago at this point.
That's crazy.
So, like, if you want to watch Prey and Hulu decides to take it off of their platform, it just doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, it's just you have Magnifico kind of embodying like every negative aspect about Disney as a company, and then you've got Asha like and the Star kind of embodying like what the positive emotions and associations people have with what makes a Disney film, like Disney proper. And you've got these two competing ideas, and it's like at the end of the movie, one clearly wins out. And I do think that there is something to that that isn't completely self-servicing, because I'm not entirely convinced that Disney executives were smart enough to understand the Magnifico parallels.
I mean, the population doesn't seem to be.
The population clearly didn't, so you can't convince me that studio executives who are known mental deficients could possibly have understood this very, very subtle bit of writing. But I don't think it's like entirely self-serving that Asha's side wins out, because ultimately what people associate with Disney are those like big overarching, more cuddly feelings of nostalgia, and it's not the corporate thing. And I think the statement of making this the 100-year movie is, like, from a writing standpoint, is to say these are the problems, but eventually, as long as we keep putting out the positivity just from everyone, not just from Disney, everyone keeps putting out positivity, eventually the darker side of this will go away. And that might be one day the folding of Disney as a company, if we want to be like super optimistic. And I don't know, it's an interesting thought, especially as Disney's archive being 100 years old now. Slowly but surely things will begin to enter the public domain, and they won't have really any resources to keep those positive things to themselves anymore.
Well,
that might be wishy-washy, but I don't know, it's an interesting thought.
That's the other thing that I feel like where this movie kind of breaks down is I feel like the criticism it wants to lob at Disney in the form of Magnifico and the positive upswing it wants to use in the form of Asha, it's not very good, because I think it just kind of circles back on itself. Because at the end of the day, the problem with Disney as a company is that it's kind of become so incestuous in the sense that it's always recycling the same things over and over and over again. It's more in line with something like what the Lego movie was critiquing, of always building inside of the box and always building according to the instructions. And so, like, Magnifico is taking away everyone's wishes and hoarding them in his giant tower, but the consequence of that is that the entire kingdom is stagnated, that the entire kingdom has become infantilized and is worshiping him and his sort of like petty theatrics Wizard of Oz style that makes them feel good. And the way you represent the character breaking out of that pattern is to do a very clean cut, repetitive, basic princess story that's like every other princess story that perpetuates the cycle to begin with. I think the real sort of trouble with this movie is like it wants to criticize Disney in the form of Magnifico, but it's criticizing Disney using the very things that the movie seems like it's trying to criticize too. Like, if you had a protagonist more like Elsa, not to say that Elsa is necessarily a great character or anything, but if you had a protagonist more like Elsa that felt more truly like against the grain of a Disney princess in the context of that movie, I would buy the criticism more. But because Asha's story and the way the movie is structured is just so like beat for beat the most basic princess story ever, it doesn't feel particularly interesting, or it doesn't feel like it's particularly pointing that criticism in a way that makes much sense.
Okay, I want to step in there because I don't agree that Asha's story is the most basic princess thing. Let me just say that real quick. Most like evident for that is going to be the fact that there is no prince to carry her away into the sunset at the end. There's no attempt or interest to do a love story, which is like the most fundamental part of your Disney formula. But go ahead and continue your point.
Well, but the bigger thing about it is that you compare this to something like Encanto or Moana or even Frozen, and you look at like the structure of this movie, the way it opens with explanation of this magic far-off kingdom, and then it introduces your main female character, and then that main female character has a big song about the world that they live in, and then that leads them to meet the big bad guy. And like the progression of this story is so cookie cutter that I was calling it as it was happening, and I'm not the type of person to normally do that. I'm the kind of person when I watch a movie with a twist, even if it's the most obvious twist in the world, if I'm into the movie, I will be surprised. And as I was watching this, I'm just like, okay, this is where this happens, and this is where this happens, and this is where this happens. And I think the problem that you end up with is like if you want to critique the IP hoarding, cultural stagnation, infantilizing of Disney, I think if you want to do that in a way that really resonates, you have to actually break from that mold, and the movie never does. The movie has a gesture towards a critique of Disney in the form of Magnifico, but it's not really committed to that criticism because at the end of the day, it's just another Disney princess movie.
I don't know if I fully agree with that, but I don't know what I would have to say to like dissuade you of it, because again, I just feel like it's not, well, for one, I don't think Asha's like ever going to qualify to be a Disney princess unless we go like by Mulan standards, because she doesn't like become a princess by the end of the movie. She's not a princess to start out by like birth. There's no love interest in the film. The film is performed so poorly, I don't think we'll ever see Asha in anything again.
I don't think she's stepping into like the next Disney video game or anything.
Oh, dude, like Disney was embarrassed by this one. Like most of the time, the second these films have like left theaters, Disney has rushed them onto streaming, and it took months for Wish to come on.
Yeah, you were telling me about
crazy. That. Like, because this came out like what, November of last year, or maybe a little bit later than that. And then it didn't have a long theatrical run, and it didn't get uploaded to Disney Plus until like March, which is just a really long time for them.
Which is also interesting given like the way they've been treating Pixar releases really ever since the pandemic, where they just get, even if they get a theatrical run, they're dumped onto streaming almost immediately.
Yeah, so like there's other possibilities for why they decided to do it this way, certainly, but like given the public response to this one, it's hard to imagine that they weren't hoping that people would just kind of forget about it a little bit.
It is interesting too that like Disney had two big animated releases last year that seemed to have like very similar opening weekends, but then kind of track differently as time went on. Because this movie came out last year, it didn't do well at the box office, and the critics hated it, and then Disney just like tried to erase it, like you said. But you compare it to Elemental from last year, which I also did not see because I don't watch a lot of animated movies.
It's
But
I've still not finished that fucking movie.
but Elemental comes out in, I think, around the summer of that year. It has a really bad opening weekend, but it has really good reviews and it has really positive word of mouth. And then it became this thing where, like, over the course of the month, Elemental was actually making more and more money as time went on. And if had Disney decided to keep it in theaters longer, it probably would have been a commercial success. But then they just threw it onto Disney Plus, and it stopped that growth in the middle of it. But it's interesting how like Elemental was written off in the same way that Wish was initially, but when the movie came out, it had like an entirely opposite legacy.
I don't know. It's weird because I've tried like 3 times with Leah to watch Elemental, and we both just get fucking bored. Um,
I mean, I haven't seen it, so I have no idea if it's good or not. But I just think it's interesting that like it does bad opening weekend and then progressively gets better because that almost never happens anymore.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's crazy. Um, so we've talked a lot about like the overarching things about this movie, the structure, a lot of the thematic stuff. We haven't talked much about like the specifics, the characters, whatnot. Did you have a favorite character from this? Did you have like a favorite scene in this as you were watching? Something you really liked, something that did stand out and kind of worked for you?
I really like the interview scene that she has when we first meet Magnifico. I think that's a really fun moment in the castle, and I think Chris Pine like really turns up the charm in that moment. It's really fun to watch. But outside of like Magnifico stuff, um, I liked the bit at the end where she's trying to distract who she thinks Magnifico is in the forest when she's dressed like the fairy godmother,
Mm-hmm.
and she gets that magic wand, and she just keeps like fucking it up, like putting a dress on a tree and shit. I thought that was a fun little chase scene.
Yeah, yeah, I like that one. Um, Valentino is such a like there clearly just to get the kids to laugh, but I actually fucking I don't know. I've kind of fallen in love over the last couple weeks with Alan Tudyk. So just anything he does, I'm kind of like fucking here for it. And just he's a 3-week-old goat, but he talks like this. It's such a funny fucking gag to me. um,
He's in so much shit lately. Like we were talking about this before, but he's like in everything lately.
I know, and it's because he played King Candy in Wreck-It Ralph, and it like completely revitalized his career. It's actually insane. King Candy, not a great villain. Wreck-It Ralph, an okay movie though. Wreck-It Ralph 2 sucks.
Did not see Wreck-It Ralph 2. I thought it looked bad.
Yeah, well, you did the right thing. Anyway, Wreck-It Ralph 1 though fucking slaps.
But yeah, I mean, he's been in like basically every Disney animated movie. He was in Rogue One. He played fucking Superman in one of those DC animated movies. And he's got
the
that TV
Joker
show that-
and Clayface and Harley Quinn. It's just fucking
Yeah.
everywhere, man.
He's fucking he's on that TV show that you were telling me about, Resident Alien, which I started watching and is actually really funny.
Yes, it's so good, isn't it?
It's really funny.
Next week on Geeky Gentleman, Resident Alien.
I'm only through like the first 3 or 4 episodes, but it's really funny.
It's so good.
But yeah, he's just fucking everywhere. But in my heart, I will always know him as the guy from Knight's Tale because that movie is so good.
Yeah, and we did that one recently. I'm like, man, Alan Tudyk, what's he been in lately? I'm like, fucking everything. Oh, okay. Yep. Yep, he sure has.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, no, it's like he's literally been a character in every Disney movie since Wreck-It Ralph, and so he's in this, and he's just, I don't know, I thought he was just absolutely hilarious the whole time. As one domesticated animal to another, help us. It's just like so fucking silly. I had a good time with him and a lot of his scenes. I actually kind of really like the way that the Queen gets to play an interesting role in this movie. I thought her role was relatively unique. at least within the Disney canon, the queens tend to either be like evil or inept, and this one like actually competent and oh no, I've not realized how bad things have gotten until now kind of thing. I quite liked the role she played and the way that she got to stand with the heroes by the end of the movie. I thought was really interesting. Get the heel turn from her, so Magnifico ended up being alone. All of Magnifico's stuff is just so fucking cool to me. Just proper evil sorcerer. Like, literally, Magnifico and Jafar should just be bros. Because they're just so good. Like, there's just something to that, like, the villain has one moment. You know? Not one singular, WON. The villain is the victor kind of moment where he's like, there'll be no more wishing on stars, fucking blots out the sky. It's just so fucking like, my people will be enslaved, literally tied to the ground to worship me. Like, that was so fucking cool.
One thing that I was surprised by really early on was when Magnifico talks about why he founded the kingdom, and it's because as a kid his entire people or city or village, whatever, was wiped out. And that seemed like a kind of a dark origin for a Disney movie, and I was disappointed that nothing else ever comes of that.
I mean, I think it's just like, you talked about how the heel turn that he has, like, he's just goes from 0 to 100. I think that, like, that's all you really need to understand that, is like, this dude came from a traumatic fucking past, and just the idea of not being the most powerful man in the room literally terrifies him. Like, I guess. When Asha fucking wishes on the star for the first time, and like the whole kingdom gets that wave of magical energy, and he is just fucking shook. It bothers him so much, the idea that anyone could ever threaten him.
Well, and I mean, I think on a script level, it serves its purpose, but I just didn't find it. I feel like there's not enough there to make it like emotionally compelling, because there's just it's just a one line thing that never comes up again, and you can like read it into the rest of the movie, but that's just because the line exists doesn't mean that the emotional connection exists.
I mean, maybe. I didn't necessarily feel an emotional connection, but I think it like just provided context, and it's not brought up a ton throughout the movie. It's mentioned in the beginning. You see him like looking at this remnant of his past with Asha, and during his like big turn, when he feels threatened, like it's that same remnant of his past is clearly framed within the shot, and you just like fully understand that this is driving this man.
And I get that it's there. I'm just saying I need more of it. I feel like it's not enough to just kind of like point at it in an instance. I feel like it needs to be a bigger part of his character to make it compelling.
I mean, I don't know, that might just be your mileage may vary kind of thing. I personally didn't feel like it needed to do much more than it did to serve the function. So I was kind of happy with it as leaving it a little vague.
I think at the end of the day, a lot of like what my criticism sort of boils down to is like, when you watch a Disney movie, you kind of know what you're going to get. It's the same with MCU and Star Wars movies at this point, where like, you can't go into a Star Wars or an MCU movie expecting the Dark Knight every time they come out. They're just never going to do that anymore. That's not in them. So you just kind of have to accept it for its level of mediocrity when it comes to the MCU. So like when Thor: Love and Thunder came out and everyone shit on it, but like at the end of the day, you look at that movie in the context of the greater MCU, and it's honestly about average. It's about what an MCU movie is at the end of the day. That doesn't make it good, but it's kind of the standard of what an MCU movie is. And I kind of have the same thing with Wish, where I sort of feel like it's not a bad movie, but it's a Disney movie, and a Disney movie means that it's a passable animated feature for kids. but there's very little where I feel like they as artists are kind of pushing animation forward the way they used to. When we were doing that anime episode, we talked about how like anime eyes are inspired by Disney eyes. When's the last time Disney has made anything where you feel like a future animator is watching this and getting inspired to do something new and unique, as opposed to animators now doing things like TMNT Mutant Mayhem or Miyazaki's Boy and the Heron, or the Lego movie even, where it feels like we're going in completely different and unique and interesting directions, and the people that are left behind are Disney and Pixar.
Very true. One of the interesting things, people accuse this movie of being like AI generated animation, which is really funny because that's like the one thing that AI fully on its own has not been able to do very well. But the reason they were like accusing it of that is it looks really choppy, and it doesn't have like, not motion blur, it doesn't have like smear frames in it and stuff, and like people are assuming that was, you know, something nefarious, and really what it was is the animators were trying to match the frame rate and style of antiquated animation that you saw in something like Snow White, but doing it in CG. So characters, you know what a smear frame is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, like characters didn't have smear frames because that shit hadn't been invented yet. So instead of doing smears, they just let things play out the way and framed things the way that a classic Disney film like Snow White would have been. And that's like, you know, maybe not the best decision because certainly those techniques were invented for a reason, but it's an interesting attempt. And I don't think that, like, that should have been the thing. I think that might have been the thing, honestly, that triggered so many people against the movie, is just it comes off looking kind of cheap because if you don't understand what they're trying to do, it looks kind of incompetent. Because it's like literally like watching a CG animated movie that was animated by someone 100 years ago.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
it's interesting intention. I'm not sure how well the execution really is. It never really got to the point where it like actually bothered me, but you know, I could definitely see that some of these techniques are there.
the kind of like mixed media and different animation styles all in one movie in like both Mutant Mayhem and Spider-Verse are really interesting things that have taken off lately, because like in Mutant Mayhem, the new Ninja Turtles movie, there's some really interesting choices where like the pencil lines that outline the characters aren't neat. So you'll see like a line come off of a character's shoulder just because it's a sketchy line, but it's moving in 3D animation. So like it has this rough pencil look to it the entire time. Or like how in Spider-Verse, different universe Spider-Men are animated in different styles and at different frame rates, so they don't always feel like they're in the same world together. And in Across the Spider-Verse, you had like that watercolor style for Gwen's world before you move and get to the Vulture, who's got more like pencil lines around him and he looks like he's textured on paper and stuff. And those kinds of choices are really interesting. I think the thing about it is you have to be competent in your execution, and you have to kind of like weave it into the story so it feels like it's geared towards something. One thing about Wish that is interesting is the animation doesn't look exactly like any other Disney movie, where there is kind of a texture to it that feels a little bit different. What you're talking about with the lack of smear frames and causing it to kind of be stilted in places, like that gives it kind of like its own character. The problem I think you kind of run into is I feel like not enough of the movie is trying to do these kinds of interesting creative things like the way Spider-Verse does. And I think what you can like really boil that down to is they want to do that new animation style, but they want to stick to the basic character models and aesthetic and color palette of a Disney movie. And they do not deviate from that. In years they haven't deviated from that. Where like you can go back and you can look at like how Pixar character models have gotten better, but the art style has stayed effectively the same, where like you could put all of the recent Disney CGI movies and all the Pixar movies into a world together, and every character looks like they just kind of belong there because there's no diversity of animation movie to movie.
No, 100%. That's been like a big critique I've seen people make about the Pixar movies, especially lately, is like all the Pixar like middle-aged men just look exactly the same.
Yeah, they're all just Mr. Incredible.
Yep, yep. And so it's really funny. Like someone sketched one of the guys from Monster University, and like put him next to one of the dudes from like Elemental, and it's just like, yeah, this guy is on fire. That's what happened. It's literally the same character design. He's just on fire now.
And you know, again, it is kind of a shame because like you go back to Toy Story, right? And Apple investing in it and having this big desire in the 90s to make the world's first fully CG animated movie, and it was a technical milestone. And now we're like 20 something years past Toy Story, and like what's the last time Disney has done anything where it felt like they were pushing animation forward?
They have definitely started to rest on their laurels to a degree. In all fairness, if you want, when's the last time that Disney did something to push animation forward? It is Encanto. Would probably be my go-to. That is the first time, and it's like subtle as fuck. But that is the first time that every style of hair has been featured on a character in a movie. So you have a range of characters in that film that have straight hair to super tightly curled hair, which is what they call it, like, you know, basically black people hair. You've got like the straight, super straight, you know, Anglo hair, white bitch hair, to the super curly, very tight, coiled hair that you have for like a lot of that is like characteristic for black hair. And so, like, you know, that was a achievement, but like, you know, you did hair.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's definitely a qualitative difference between like doing the hair and doing Spider-Verse, you know?
No, I mean, for sure. It is like a very distinct thing. So like Disney's been pushing a lot of like the rendering and stuff. So like the hair journey kind of started all the way back with funny enough with Rapunzel, and it goes all the way, you know, through Frozen, so they could get like the braids right for the girls in that, and then you get to Moana to get like the big long curls that her hair has, and then you get to Encanto where you get like these super tight curls down. It's nothing, but it's interesting from like an animation standpoint, because hair physics are super fucking complicated when you're talking about CG. But nah, it's just not the best. It's not exciting. I'll definitely agree.
I guess if you really want like another recent example, you could say the Secret War title cards or the Secret Invasion title cards are AI generated. So that's a thing that they did.
Steve, what the fuck are you talking about? Secret Invasion? What's that?
The Marvel thing?
Steve, they stopped making Marvel movies after Endgame. It was called Endgame. It was the end of the MCU. What the fuck are you talking about?
You're right. I'm just thinking about this comic from like 2011 or something.
Yeah. No, MCU died with Endgame, just like Last Jedi was the last Star Wars thing ever made, and we're in a better world for it.
It's true. We have come a long way movie-wise in terms of like having a lot of interesting animation techniques, whether you're talking about live action or animated movies and stuff. And so it is kind of interesting. It's kind of like James Bond right now, right? Where James Bond is easily the most recognizable, important spy movie franchise ever. And it is also right now the most boring one that no one cares about. Like, isn't it insane that fucking Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible movies are now like more iconic and more feature events than fucking James Bond.
Yeah, a little bit.
That's kind of where I feel like we're at with Disney, where I feel like Disney did wish no favors. It seems like in the run up to its release after it didn't do well in the box office and not putting it on Disney Plus, but I am kind of concerned about like when the next Disney movie comes out, what are they gonna do? Are they gonna try and like bury it like Wish? Are they gonna try and smother it in the cradle like Elemental? What's their game plan here? It can't just be release sequels ad infinitum. Unless it is.
I think it might very well be release sequels ad infinitum. We're getting a live action Lilo and Stitch. We're getting Moana 2. We're getting Frozen 3.
Got Mufasa coming out, the prequel no one asked for.
What's that movie even gonna be, man?
Look, Mufasa is a lot like the planet Krypton and the Waynes. They exist to die. There is no reason to explain this further.
Yep.
The Lion King is based on Hamlet. Guess what happens to Hamlet's dad? He dies. So what the whole play is about?
It's interesting because when they made The Lion King 2, they based it loosely off of Romeo and Juliet, so maybe Mufasa's going to be based off a different Shakespeare play.
It'll be fucking King Lear, just wait.
Oh my god. I need it now. What are you talking about? Someone's going to make King Lear make sense? What?
I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe they're just going to make like animated sequels ad infinitum, and that'd be just depressing. But like, I also can't imagine like you make this movie, it doesn't do well, and anyone involved in it wants to make their own original thing, and Disney higher ups are probably just going to be like, no, not allowed. Go back to making Frozen 4.
Yeah, no, I mean, you really, like, you can't do anything else with it. Encanto did well. I think Encanto's getting a sequel. But, like, Encanto did well in, like, pandemic era, so it's hard to say how well is there. I don't know. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of hard to say. But yeah, I don't know. I liked Wish. I thought it was actually pretty good. Not perfect, but better than most of what I've seen from the studio in the last like almost a decade. Again, Moana hard carries because if it wasn't for Moana, I would say over a decade. Like, yeah, you'd have to go back to fucking like Wreck-It Ralph for me to start being impressed again. But here we are. I think that's gonna do it. We'll go ahead and go on to ratings. I'm gonna give Wish 3.5 out of 5 ham-fisted references that did not need to be there because the subtler ones were better.
I'll give Wish 2.5 out of 5 Magnifico mirrors on the wall.
Who is the handsomest of them all?
I love that. I love how fucking egomaniacal he is.
Right? He's like,
It's
you
really
make
funny.
cookies of my face. Do it, woman. Like, that's before he's even evil. He's just got people making cookies of his face.
It's so funny. Good shit.
Yeah. Alright. I think it's Alfie's turn next week, yes?
It is indeed. I sent him a message, but I don't know if he's picked anything yet.
Who fucking knows with this boy?
He's busy
alright.
making DBDC.
Sure. Like, I don't want to make too many bitter jokes, but at the same time, I want to make bitter jokes. Like, DVDC is over. We stopped making we decided that episode 10 was the best thing ever, and we weren't going to do anything anymore.
It was your last Jedi.
Yeah. We just do that for everything now. The last thing I liked is just, and then that franchise is over.
It just does not exist anymore.
Yeah, we just stopped making stuff.
We stopped making Fast and Furious movies after Furious 7. It makes complete sense now.
Yeah, exactly. This thing didn't ruin... this thing didn't ruin the franchise. They just stopped making it after the last thing you liked. That's just what happened.
Isn't it crazy how like DC hasn't published Wonder Woman since Earth One?
Damn. I know. But at the same time, it was so good that, like, what, you don't really need it.
Yeah, it's exactly like what happened when Tom King left Batman. You just don't need it anymore.
Yeah, you just don't need Batman comics anymore. We're just done making Batman comics. All right.
There's an entire shelf on my bookshelf of post Tom King Batman, and I could burn all of it and not lose any sleep.
Yeah. Damn. All right.
Anyway.
We are your Geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.